Lessons with Pastor Carrie, and we are still talking about spiritual warfare. It's all about becoming, spiritual warfare included. Everything you go through in life has a purpose, and what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. But last week we were talking about the full armor and how you have to stand your ground and keep pushing forward because the armor does not cover the backside. Every most part of the armor is about the front of you because God expects you to stand, because once you start running, you are running in defeat. So the you are already defeated if you're running. God intended everything to be standing forward, front ways, standing your ground, fighting in battle. God does not he does not cover defeat. But today, as we progress and continue to talk about spiritual warfare, we are actually going into growth. So this is not actually spiritual warfare, but it's what spiritual warfare does. It's all about what becoming does. It's all about what hearing from the heart does. And there are stages of this. So this is very important. And sometimes if you know the stages, you'll know what to expect. So if you look at Numbers chapter 17, there's a story in there about Aaron and how his staff or his rod grew. Um, did I write the scripture down? If I did, I'll read it. But it said the things that it did: it sprouted, it budded, it sprouted, it budded, it blossomed, and it bore fruit. Okay. So it sprouted, it budded, it blossomed, and it bore fruit. And those are the actual stages that life goes through when we have to bear fruit. Um, God is changing our character into what He created us to be, into a character that is like His. Okay, God is preparing His bride for the bridegroom, and like the Bible says, two cannot be unequally yoked. So we have to look like Christ. In this text, though, people were murmuring because Aaron had been chosen as the next leader. And there were actually 12 tribes of Israel. So there were more leaders than Aaron. So they were wondering, why does Aaron get to be leader? So God tells Moses to tell each leader, one leader from each tribe. So there should be 12 rods that they would give him. And the rod that God allows to blossom, to bud, okay, would be his choice for the next leader. So here we are, waiting for God to reveal. And in the next morning, he actually said he would allow that rod to bud. He never said that it would grow fruit. It would bear fruit. But that's just an event, a bonus. Okay, that's just what's expected. We're not going to get into that part of the story because that's a whole nother story. But the miracle is that God would grow something living from something that was dead, and it was showing His approval. And anytime you see God working miracles through your situation, that is His approval on the situation. He has stamped His mark of approval. So you don't have to wonder. You don't have to wonder, am I going in the right direction? Is this for me? When you see God working in it, He's saying, this is it. So they found that Aaron's staff had sprouted, budded, blossomed them, and produced ripe almonds. Um, and it was exceedingly abundantly above what they had expected. So the stages that we're going to be talking about today, before it even sprouted, what we saw was his rod was in a dormant stage. Dormant was just a seed. Is just in an explanation of it. It's just a seed before being planted. Now, his rod was not a seed before being planted, but that's just the replica of what we're speaking about today. So the rod, as the replica, was the dormant stage. That was something that had already been cut off because it was once something that was living, and it was cut off, for another purpose. Because sometimes things, once they don't serve a purpose here, they still meant to serve a purpose here. So would they call it someone's trash is someone else's treasure? But yeah, so they they took the rods in its dormant stage, gave it to Moses, and his rod sprouted, budded, blossomed, and produced. Sprouted is just when new life begins. It's the start. Budded is when growth starts taking shape. It's the promise. Blossomed is when it reaches its full beauty. Okay, that's the peak. And then we have produced. That's the results from that are gathered, the fruit. And those are the stages that we're going to be speaking about today. We're not going to spend that much time on dormant, but dormant describes a state where life, growth, or development is temporarily slowed down or stopped. And in this situation, growth had stopped because it was severed from the tree. Just like when Jesus said we have to stay connected to the vine. If we don't stay connected to the vine, our life ceases. Life ceases, and we will not bear fruit, not the fruit that God intends for us to bear. And this is the same situation here. But God was resurrected, so He gave new life. Look, God just gave me that revelation. He resurrected that rod. He resurrected that rod. Not that it was for purpose, for a single purpose. And that they say that rod still sits in the what is say in the what's that box, the ark of the covenant, but Aaron's rod has stopped growing. It was cut off, like I said, but God. So the period in a plant's life cycle where growth halts to conserve energy during winter or drought. So a dormant stage can also just be a cycle where you're not producing fruit because you're conserving energy, or and there's a winter or a drought, and you need to when it says be still. Yes, so that can also be a sense of a dormant stage. You're still living, you're just not being producing right now. The organism or person is not dead. Rather, their energy is pulled deep inside to rest, survive harsh conditions, or prepare for a future season of breakthrough. Now, spiritually, a season where a person's talents, calling, or deeper identity are present but completely hidden, inactive, or unawakened. You see how that all ties in together? So we also have our dormant stages. That doesn't mean that that's the end. Just because you don't see things working, life, because you don't see fruit from your labor, from your work, it's only for a season. Sometimes the dormant stage is only for a season. um Now, we saw another example of this dormant stage. I'm gonna give you, not we saw, but I'm gonna give you another example of the dormant stage. When we were talking about Peter last week, we were talking about Peter the last few weeks. We're gonna talk about Peter some more again today. But just to look at Peter's life, it's actually the dormant stage is actually before the calling, before God calls and we answer the call. So it's like Peter was in the boat when Jesus came to him and approached him and said, "Let me make you fishers of men," right? But before Peter followed, before Peter got the call, that's our dormant stage. That's before the sprouting, before we start taking root. Okay? And when we're in that dormant stage, we're not being used for what God has us for. We are not producing fruit. That's why it's so important that we answer the call. Just answer the call. A lot of people be like, "I'm not ready." He doesn't expect you to have everything together. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing, and He'll help you get it together. It's so much easier when He helps you do it, because you can't do it by yourself anyway, because the enemy is always going to make you think that there's something in the way that you are not ready. It's not about being ready. It's about being willing. Two differences there. There's a big difference there. Willing just takes a yes. So, um, Peter was in the boat. Jesus approached him. He's in a boat, sleeping, but full of potential. He doesn't even know that he has all this potential, that all of this is, that God is going to use him to do everything that he did. But then he comes, he in contact, he meets a man named Jesus. So then, after he answered the call, then according to the rod, what's his name, Aaron's rod, what's the next process? It sprouts. Everything also always has an order. It was not just for nothing that he listed the order of the steps that Aaron's rod took. Always pay attention to the order of things, because things are written for a reason. And this is how we grow as well. This is supposed to be a simile of our life and how we bear fruit. We are like those rods before we ever meet Jesus. But once we say yes, then we begin to sprout. So the sprouting refers to the state of a seed, grain, or legum that has begun, that has just begun to undergo germination. This is the start, a new beginning. So this natural process occurs when a dormant seed is exposed to moisture and warmth, causing it to wake up and put forth a tiny new shoot or root. It's funny because I just started growing some things. I found out that you can actually put certain things, certain vegetables or whatever, in water when you have the root, like an onion. You can put the bottom of it in some water, just leave the top of it out, or the bottom of a cabbage, or the bottom of romaine lettuce or something, or lettuce itself, but once you put them in water and leave the top exposed so it can grab the moisture, it starts germination and it begins to wake up and grow roots. And I was like, that's exactly what's going on in my little garden right now. But it's so awesome to watch. You look at it, and the top starts having bottom, actually the bottom just starts pulling out starts growing these little teeny fine roots, one at a time. But then they all just start growing. But as you leave it there, it's starting to get life. Then you start seeing the green come out. So this natural process occurs when a dormant seed is exposed to moisture, the water, and the warmth. So I left it out in the sun. I exposed it to some moisture and some warmth, and it caused it to wake up, and it started growing roots. And that's what we do. And Christ is that warmth for us. He's that moisture. He is the river of living water. So God didn't just put the buds on the staff, though. He went through the process and he sped it up so that it was done in God's miraculous timing. Because God wants the glory out of his work. If it's something that takes natural process, are we just going to glorify God and say God did it? Even though he did, because God made everything. And without him would be nothing made that was made. But we just naturally like to take credit for things. But it was a spiritual speed, like God's timing. Everything that the process takes, he did it in one night. And then it also bore fruit. And so this process gave Aaron roots, not just the rod. It gave Aaron roots. It gave Aaron root to his calling. It showed everyone that God put a stamp of approval on his positioning, on his calling. It gave him a root to who he was supposed to be. He was able to be sure-footed and grounded in his calling because he knew God had did that. But what you are rooted in is so, 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 so very important. Because what you're rooted in is how you're going to start bearing your fruit. So now Aaron is rooted in God and his positioning, and he has to start bearing fruit as this leader. He has to be fruitful in his position. But sprouting is essentially catching a plant at the transition phase between a seed and the new seedling. So sprouting, once again, is essentially catching a plant at the transition phase between a seed and a new seedling. So the seed absorbs the water, which triggers a biochemical change, and roots are activated. That's the cycle of life. It's the cycle of life. So, like I said, and that's before we're dormant. The sprouting is when we accept God's call. So now we become rooted in God. That's where we take our roots. And this is actually, even when we talk about Peter and when he accepted the call for Christ, Peter was that dormant twig. And he went from a dormant twig to a seed, or early sapling, as some people might say, who knows a little bit about vegetation and about germination and about farming and all that kind of stuff. But before Jesus gets into his boat, Peter was just a regular fisherman. Peter was just a regular fisherman. And then he changes everything. So botanically speaking, he is a dormant branch surviving in winter. He is self-reliant, living purely in the natural world, unaware of the spectacular spiritual potential encoded inside his DNA. And that's the same thing that God gives us. And through the Holy Spirit, we have awareness of everything that God is doing, everything he wants to do through us. But after the sprouting comes the budding. Then that's the next level. That's not just you seeing a few roots here and there. The budding describes the stage where the plant begins to develop buds. That's that green stuff I was talking about on the outside. That's that green stuff I was talking about that's coming up on our little cabbage and our romaine lettuce and on the leaves on my onions. So it's small, but everything starts small. Even if your small is a matter of perception, small is everything starts small compared to where God wants to take it. So it's the physical sign that a plant is exiting dormancy, or moving into a new phase of its life cycle. So the budding process, we're going to get into this budding process because I had a lot of notes on this budding process. Outside of gardening, right? The term is used to describe something in its earliest stages of development that shows promise. You get that last word I said? It's all about the promise, about what God has promised us. So not looking at the vegetation right now, looking at our life cycle. God came to give us life and that we might have it abundantly. The promise that he came for, the reason why he came. This is what he wants to produce in and through us. And if we'd accept the call, and start taking roots in him and let him lead our lives, we can begin to bud. And it's going to start bearing, it's going to bear the fruit that God wants it to be. And it's going to be more than you even imagine, just like that rod. They didn't expect it to bear those almonds. He never told Moses, I'm going to make it bear fruit. He said that I'm going to make it bud. But everything that God does is more than we expect him to do. So we all caught up in the process of change, but this change is to come to give us life. You can't have something different without change. You cannot have something different without change. And this change is for your good, not for your evil. But I had used a couple uh natural examples of budding so you can kind of understand, if you're not familiar with vegetation or farming, so you can understand how like budding is the beginning, sort of like a budding romance or budded talent. It refers to something that is just starting to grow, and has the potential to bloom into something much larger. But unlike the sprouting phase, where everything is just new and exciting, the budding phase is actually more focused. It causes you to be more intentional. You start to see specific areas in your life, in your character, or specific opportunities beginning to take a definite shape. This is when it's beginning to take shape, y'all. The buds are the proof that the growth is real. You start seeing specific things take a definite shape in your life, and you know the growth is real even if they aren't ready to be picked yet. So it's like, I didn't know. Get this. I always tell y'all about my battle with uh shyness. Okay? And as God had me stepping out, okay, in my when I accepted God, okay, I began to take roots and everything. I didn't know how God was going to change me, what he had for me. You don't know what the fruit is going to be until it bears the fruit. But it's always something good because it's God, because you're rooted in God. So as in my sprouting phase, my first step of sprouting, I started to, God actually was allowing me to speak in front of people, and I did not want to. So sometimes, like I said, the budding phase is more focused. You start to see specific areas in your character or specific opportunities beginning to take a definite shape. So my character was beginning to change. I didn't want to do it because I was still caught up in, but I'm not. But the Spirit said, but you are. So I had to allow the Spirit to bud what I was meant to be, not what I thought that I was. Because that's the transforming process. We think that everything that we've been through has molded us a certain way to make us think that this is who we are and this is how we behave and that's just me. But it's not. Once you begin to allow God to lead you and to grow you up and to mature you, and you begin to bud and you start saying yes. Like I say, he just needs someone who's willing. And you can start saying yes. You're going to start seeing things taking shape in your life that you did not know was you. But that was all the beginning of something greater. See, that was just the very beginning of it. So, like I said, the buds are the proof. And it's showing, that there is life in you. There is this in you. I can do this. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. There is, and it bears so many different things. It bears the fruit, but it's all bearing fruit to show you. It all bears the fruit of the Spirit. But you really won't know what you're meant to be, who you're meant to become, what God is going to bring forth from your ministry until he grows you up, until he matures you, until you allow him to do it. Because sometimes we stand in God's way. We stand in God's way. And the minute God starts trying to bud us, it's not always the sprouting. But because sometimes you can say yes. But then when you find out what it all entails, because of the budding, then we start standing in God's way. Because I did say yes, but I didn't know it was going to be involved that. I didn't know you was going to want me to do that. Your yes is your yes. That's why he don't tell us all of it in the beginning, because we never know what he's going to ask of us. But we have to understand and trust that he just wants what's best for us. But the production does not mean completion. Budding is not a one-time event, but a repeating cyclical process that happens over and over again throughout your life. When I think of that, because I looked at when I studied the budding, I was like, no, but we be going through this more than just one time. You don't just bud and that's it. But budding, if you think about it, he's trying to grow you in so many different areas. So he has budding of that, and then he has the budding of that, and he has the budding of that, and you have to go through things to make this grow, and go through things to make this grow. So budding is not just a one-time process, but it's all meant to bear fruit, and it all has purpose. So once a plant reaches maturity and produces fruit or seeds for the first time, it enters a lifetime of recurring growth cycles. Recurring growth cycles. You know how some plants are perennials? So they always come back. They have to come back every year. Look, I'm talking about a lot about plants. Maybe I'm just happy about my green thumb, y'all. But God had me plant these things, and I believe that it was because I told y'all at one time, He always has me, allows me to go through things sometimes for the message that I speak. But He allows, once a plant reaches maturity and produces fruit or seeds for the first time, it enters a lifetime of recurring growth cycles. So we have to be, aware that when there's growth, it starts from a seedling. The seedling actually has to is as it's produced as it receives moisture and warmth, as I was saying, it builds all this energy to burst through what it was actually protecting it, the protection barrier. So when we are going through our tests and our trials, we have to go through some intense things because it's activating who we're meant to be. It's actually trying to help us to come out of the shell, to produce, to become, to change. We can't stay a seed. It can't stay a seed forever. We must change into, and we must grow into something that God can use. That's something that will be seen by the world to say, look at God. Life is all about God. And when life is when you're able to produce life from something, God is the only one who else can give life but God. So that's why he just wants to be glorified. So it's like, and you're saying yourself, God did that. Other people will look at your story and say, that was nothing but God. And the more that you give God glory for everything He does, the more that God will give you. And the more God will do for you, and the more God will use you. But like I was saying, we mature in one area. You can mature in one area, but not in another. You can mature in one area and not in another. Just because you have produced fruit in a specific season of your life, like a career or a major project or raising your family, it doesn't mean that your growth is over. So it could have been in your career, but now it's meant to start a family. Or it could have been your family, but now you have a major project. Or it could have been something, that you are that God had you in a season to do something, but now the season has completely changed and you're finding yourself in uncharted territory. So you never know what it's going to be. You just have to allow the Holy Spirit to lead you. You will naturally return to the budding stage whenever you start a new chapter, learn a new skill, or enter a new season of life. So budding is just like a life journey. So we have to get okay with it. We have to be okay with being uncomfortable, because budding is going to take some tests and some trials, some tribulations. Because in the end, He's trying to get us to bear fruit. He's trying to get us to transform, to change. For a plant to bud, the roots must be deep and the sap must be flowing. God is building the infrastructure needed to support the fruit. So it's like I see these little roots there now. But once I start putting it in dirt, those roots are going to grow so deep that that is going to really grow. Um, if you, I should have brought my little cup on here so I can show y'all how small the roots are right now. But they're small. But then once as I studied it, it said once I plant it in some deep water, then you're actually going to start seeing it. It's not just going to bud. You're going to start seeing the onion right now. The cabbage and everything is growing. But the onion is said is not actually going to grow any onions until I put it in some dirt so it can grow deep roots. If I don't take it out of the water when it's time, it will die. So just because your growth started one way doesn't mean that that's the way that God is going to continue to grow you. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be ready for change. And sometimes taking you out of one season into another season, taking you out of the water, from the water to the dirt, it might be so mind-blowing to you because you're like, I'm not used to this. But this is what God is using to build you, to change you, to transform you, to do something great in you so you can bear fruit. But you can't have the weight of the fruit without the strength of the branch that was formed during the budding stage. So every phase is essential. And then there's something called a rejuvenation bud. That's when you actually have, that's actually when I was talking about recurring and things like that. This is about pruning and new growth. Pruning and new growth. So if a mature plant is heavily pruned, damaged by a storm, or goes through a period of trauma, it will activate hidden dormant buds beneath its bark. That is so good. Yabo Shema. That is so good. If a mature plant is heavily pruned, damaged by a storm, or goes through a period of trauma, it will activate hidden dormant buds beneath its bark. You know how we go through stages in life that have been very traumatic, and the trauma is actually meant to produce something greater in you, because God knows what is in you. But sometimes we allow the trauma to paralyze us. We allow the trauma to stop us, to cause us to go back living in our dormancy. But it's actually because God knows that there are hidden dormant buds underneath the surface that have not been activated yet. So just like that mature plant, the trauma, the damage caused by the storm, all of that is supposed to help activate those dormant buds. So we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep progressing. We cannot let life cycles stop us and hinder us from who God had created us to be. We cannot allow, life cycles, the hard times, the hard part to stop us. It might make you fall. Look, nobody's perfect, but you get back up again. You get back up again and you keep going. You remember how one of the lessons we were talking about in becoming, we were talking about how loss always produces life. Loss is always meant to produce life. And now, I knew that. But now this is actually showing you why. Because the traumatic experience is helping to, reach what was actually dormant, what needs to be living. It's actually meant to cause you to thrive in areas where you didn't know you had. You be like, well, that was my life. That was who did this for me, and I don't know what I'm going to do without them. Now you have to step up. That job was helping me to get this. and that job was doing this. But now the job is gone, and God is teaching you how to be something different, how to be more. What can you say? You lost your how to be more frugal or economical because what you were doing might have been wasteful. You always have to find out the reason for the process, because once you find out the reason for the process, you can begin to thrive and allow it to take its course. Because when you don't know and you're in denial and you're having your pity party about it, it's just going to extend the situation. Joy comes in the morning when you are out of the situation. So you have to let God be God and do what He's doing, because He knows what He's doing. No one knows better than God. He knows what He created you for. He knows what's in you. He knows what's lying dormant. He knows what it's going to take to get it out of you. Look, I used to own a few hair salons. And when I first opened the first one, I was still in my shy stage. And that's what God used to break me out of that shell. God had told my husband for us to open that salon, and I had to support my husband. So I didn't know that it was going to put me to the front. So I left my job and I worked there. And then it made me start speaking up and approaching people rather than waiting for people to approach me. Because if I wanted this business to thrive, I had to get beyond what I felt comfortable with. And I had to do what was necessary. So my comfortability was no longer present. It was gone. But God used that to take me out of my comfort zone, and to start to open up to bring give something life that was lying dormant within me. The enemy wanted me to think that I wasn't this person, but I didn't know that I was, because it was dormant and it wasn't being used. And all throughout life, I thought that I was this shy person. And it still tries to come back sometimes, especially when I'm put on a spot and I have to do something else out of my comfort zone. But then I speak life into it and I say, I am who God says I am. And I just grit my teeth and I do it. And like I said, once you get into the mode of it, the fear goes away. I don't always do things in the absence of fear. Sometimes I have to do it in the presence of it. But the willingness has to be stronger than the fear. So even though the tree has already produced fruit for decades, I mean, I'm getting back, y'all. I'm getting back. This is talking about that pruning and that growth, that dormant buds beneath the bark. But even though the tree has already produced fruit for decades, this emergency budding allows it to grow brand new branches and start a fresh cycle of life. And that's what happened to me. And that's what happens to all of us throughout life. But a bud is actually a protective casing. A bud is protective casing. It keeps the delicate flower safe from the elements until the timing is perfect. Until the timing is perfect, y'all. And only God knows what that perfect timing is. That's why we have to trust Him. That's why, sometimes we think we're ready for this and ready for that. And we be asking God for this and for that. And then we don't. And then when God don't give it to us, it's like, God, but why you didn't answer my prayer? Or why you didn't give me what I asked for? Why, because sometimes we don't like no. We feel like we need this thing, but we don't actually need it. God wants us to take another route. But we don't want to take the route. See, if God doesn't give us that thing that we need, we have no choice to figure out something else. So, and when you're figuring out something else, that is actually growth. That's what I've been doing in my business. Now I sell sweets and treats. I sell sweets and treats. Y'all got to try my sweets and treats. But anyway, back to the subject. I didn't mean to get off subject, y'all. But in this business, I'm learning something new. I didn't know that I was going to stop and do a whole different business. But God has me starting a whole new business. And um, I believe this is just a seed for something greater. This business is a seed for something greater. But right now, He has me in the budding phase where I'm being protected until until um, He's ready to expose. So whatever this business is meant to birth, whatever this business is meant to do, you know, He actually has to. He's teaching me things through this that I didn't learn from my other business. He's teaching me, and I'm learning so much. And I'm like, sometimes, the budding phase can be so stressful. But you just have to learn. You have to be patient through it because it takes focus and it takes, willingness. It takes, like I said, the ability to shift. It takes you coming out of your comfort zones. It takes an open mindset. It takes you being able to do come. Um, it takes you being able to allow God to stretch you. I've been stretched, y'all, and God is still stretching me. But this budding phase is actually He's actually protecting your potential. Things can't be exposed too early because when they're exposed too early, it can be ruined. It can be ruined by the storm. Remember I said about how the storm come and or trauma and all this kind of stuff, and and things have to get and things go through an extra pruning. But that thing wasn't supposed to be pruned yet. It's not ready. So it has to be protected. Because the budding phase, God is actually doing things in you to produce a greater potential. So um God is protecting the potential of what is about to blossom so that it isn't damaged by premature exposure. When things have premature exposure, things can be damaged by the sun. With too much sun, things can be damaged by. Let's go back to Peter. Peter, and I don't even think I have this in my notes for. I don't know if I have this in my notes for later, but it's hitting me right now. Premature exposure. Peter was like, "If that's you, bid me to come to you." In this situation, God granted. He answered the request. He answered the prayer. He said, "Come." But Peter's faith wasn't at the point where he could survive that. But he still reached a point that was stretched him beyond where he was before he got out of that boat. So with his faith not being there to completely finish the task, he began to sink. But God was right there to catch him before he was destroyed. So God is always there with you in the process. But sometimes you're going to, be involved in things that you might actually not. How do I want to say this? You may not actually win. But sometimes failure is necessary because it teaches you more than you knew before. If he had never stepped out of the boat, even though he didn't realize he was at reached his destination, he would have never knew he could walk on water. So even though he wasn't ready, he didn't make his destination, it was still necessary. He didn't completely beat the struggle, but he still defeated the enemy because now he was stronger. He was strong. He was stronger than what the enemy, where he was before he got out of that boat. And then he was actually able to bring a testimony to those who were still sitting inside the boat. So not only did it make him stronger, it brought others watching. It made others watching stronger as well. So there's always a transition point. There's always a transition point between these things, and you got to realize when you are rooting, taking root in something, when you are sprouting in something, when you are budding in something. Once you know these things, you become more diligent in your work. So now that I understand that, when I was supposed to first start this business, right? That was, when I first said yes. That was the, what was the first word? The sprouting phase. I took root in something. I'm just trying to make it relational, y'all. When I first started the business, that was the sprouting phase. I took root in something. Now, like I said, he has me in the budding phase. It's just beginning. It's new, but it's starting to, you can see the life in it, and you can see God producing. Okay. It's not there right now. We're at the fruit, at the peak. It hasn't reached the peak, but it's something new. And then you can see the life. But budding is the in between stage. It is no longer just a seed, but it isn't yet a flower. It's the stage of anticipation, waiting to see what it's going to be, waiting to see what's going to happen. And also, it's often the most testing because it requires the most patience. It requires patience, y'all. So, this is the transition phase of development where you have left behind your past security, or Peter left behind his past security in the boat, or me, I left my job, my past security, okay? But I have not yet mastered my future potential. So Peter began to sink. But while he had his eyes on Christ, he still kept walking. So, y'all, I'm just trying to keep my eyes on Christ so I can keep walking. Pray for me. Because if you lose your focus, you will begin to sink. That is the thing about the budding phase. It is so easy to not know which way to go or what to do. But that's why you have to keep your focus on Christ, because he shows you, to lead you and guide you in how he is the good shepherd, and he will lead you and guide you in what to do and how to move. But that's why you have to keep your focus on him, because I don't know what to do. I don't know which way to go. This is a new business for me. It's uncharted territory for me. I don't know. But as God leads me and guides me, I won't sink. That's why I have to keep my focus on him. So just because I took a leap of faith doesn't mean that I have it all together, that I have all the answers. That's the budding phase. We don't always have all the answers. But as we keep moving, as we keep growing, you're gonna see some life, and you're gonna know you're moving in the right direction. And God is gonna keep leading you. But you have you have the desire, but you don't know, but you do not have the stamina. And I don't have the stamina for something great right now. That's why it has to start small. It has to be in the growth phase where it grows big, because during the growth phase, God gives you the stamina. He builds you. That's what it's levels, it's levels, it's levels. And that's the same thing for life. That's the same thing for the work God has you to do. That's the same thing in ministry. That's the same thing in family. It's the same thing for every cycle, every positioning, every hat God has you wear. But like Peter on the water, you have to have enough faith to step out. That's why when I first started the business, I felt like the Spirit said, leave your job. I just had to say yes. To me, it was like walking on water. See, he took me in baby steps. The first business he gave me, right? He allowed me to keep my job and help fund it with on my job. And I thought he was going to do the same thing this time when I said yes, when I answered the call, right? So you don't always know. But before it got really off his feet, he said, leave your job. And y'all, that was over a year ago. And he has kept all my bills paid on time. That's what God will do. All my bills have been paid on time. He kept my good credit standing. And see, God is just good. God is just good. God is just good. You just have to have faith. That, like I said, he took me in phases, because the first business, and I thought he took me from um the water. He's taking me from the water to the dirt. Like that onion. I was on a job and I thought I was going to be doing that. But then he said, no, in order for you to bear fruit, in order for you to produce, I'm going to have to take you out this water now. And I'm going to have to put you in something completely different. Now you have to rely solely on me. This is not about, this is not about your job, being comfortable, having a safety net. This is about what I'm telling you to do so I can be glorified. It's all God. And that's how Peter was walking on water. I felt like, and look, not that I felt like I was walking on water. And I just have to keep my focus, because like Peter walking on water, you have to have enough faith to step out, but not enough. Like Peter on the water, you have enough faith to step out, but not enough seasoned maturity to withstand the wind. You and yourself don't have enough seasoned maturity to withstand the wind. But as long as you keep your focus on God, God helps you to withstand the wind. That's why he will not put more on you than you can bear. That's why only things come that God knows you're prepared for. If God allows you to go through it, you are ready for it. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do about this? Trust God and pray about it and allow the Spirit to lead you. That's the missing piece. We don't instantly pray about things and allow the Spirit to lead. But it is a stage marked by clumsy attempts. Look, I know all too much about this part. Clumsy attempts, trial and error, and frequent course corrections. It is a stage marked by clumsy attempts, trial and error, and frequent course corrections. You are transforming, but you are not yet polished. See, that's why God produces you in the dark. Because you don't always know the way. And there has to be trial and error. So when you're feeling like God is leading you one way, and you take that step, it could be a completely different way. If you actually haven't heard the voice of God say, do this, then he's allowing you to take those steps because it's teaching you something else. But it might not actually be the path that he intends for you. So look, let me explain it this way. My own personal situation with this business. When we first started the other business, I started in a building, in a mall. I was in Security Mall in Baltimore, Maryland. So initially, when I started this business, I thought I was going to be in a building. So I'm up there looking for buildings, which fell through. God doesn't do everything the same. I thought I was going to keep my job, but I didn't. God doesn't do everything the same. It's been a lot of trial and error. I wouldn't say necessarily clumsy attempts, but it's been a lot of trial and error, even in finding what he actually wants me to sell. So I started with um, all these other things, and then I'm like, I'm really supposed to be diving into my popcorn. So I had to shift and make room for what God wanted me to do. But there are frequent course corrections, because you don't always know. And don't beat yourself up for taking the wrong course, for taking the wrong path, because God is going to get you on track and keep you on track. And God, like when just like Peter, when you begin to sink, He's going to catch you. He's going to catch you. He's going to let you know it's going to be all right. It is the psychological and spiritual space where growth is active and visible, but still incomplete and highly vulnerable. Growth is active and visible, but still incomplete and highly vulnerable. My business is in a vulnerable stage right now. It could go one way or the other. But because I know God is doing it and I'm trusting him, I'm not going out there saying, let me get another job. I left my job because I trust God. And I'm going to allow him to complete the process, because who knows what God is going to do through this. It's the stage of an anticipation. And so there's a lot of testing, but this is where you need the most patience, because you don't know what God is going to do. But you just have to know that God has something good for you. The stage of anticipation deals with a lot of spiritual and mental tension. Anticipation, see, is a mixture of intense excitement and acute anxiety. So you're excited, but you're tense as well. You're anxious, and you have some anxiety. I ain't gonna say, look, I'm not gonna say everything is always calm and there's no stress, because I'm human. But then I have to get back and to God and be like, look, God, I know you put me here, but and I know you're gonna bless it, because sometimes, you know, you you're looking for something to happen a certain way, and then it don't happen that way, and then you get like, oh my God. But you just have to trust the process. Because the bud is tightly wrapped, it holds a massive amount of pressurized energy waiting to burst. So patience is key. Patience is key. It has to build that tension to come out of you, to bring out of you what God has put in you, what God is doing. It's the transformation process. So my business is in a transformation process right now. I'm in a transformation process right now. Look, everything has a transformation process, not just us, not just our character. God is transforming your work. He transforms your marriage into something good. He transforms your family. God transforms. Everything, the way it started is not the way it should end. Everything is supposed to grow. But this is the stage of expectant waiting, expecting waiting. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You can feel the changes happening inside you, and you know who you are becoming. You feel the changes happening inside you, and you know who you are becoming, but it hasn't fully manifested to the outside world yet. So, not looking at my business, looking at me, I know who God is making me to be. I'm at the phase where God has already spoke to me about some things. And this is why I do what I do. But it's not manifested to the outside world yet. So I'm still in a budding phase. Um, I'm not at that phase yet where I fully matured and I keep doing what was it called? It was called the rejuvenation bud. I'm not at that rejuvenation bud process yet. I'm still in the budding phase, because God has already um enlightened me on who he's making me to be. And but I'm not quite there yet. So, and it hasn't and it has not manifested to the world yet. Because once you get there, God is going to shine his light on you. You know the scripture where he says, um, he places you on a hill that can't be, where you won't be hid. That's when you've actually reached the, what phase is that? After the sprouting. That's the, not after the sprouting, because that's the budding. After the budding comes the not the producing. It's the phase after the budding. That's when he places you on a hill where you can't be hid. He's shining his light on you for people to see. That's the next phase. So it's like, don't expect. Sometimes we want to jump ahead, and we want we want to do what other people are doing, or we want to become faster than we are. But God allows things to happen in the season that we're in, and we can't jump ahead of the process because we can't be prematurely exposed, because you can crush under pressure. Being prematurely exposed, you don't know what the enemy is going to send your way. Remember, I told you we talked about Nehemiah and Sanballat. That's a story of a man who was not prematurely exposed, because he knew who he was. He knew the job that he had to do. And Sanballat was trying to destroy him, but he withstood under the pressure. And God allowed him to build that wall in record time. The work was completed. So we have to just trust God's timing and God's process. But it requires deep patience, because you can't force it. You can't force a button to open ahead of time without destroying it. That's deep. You can't force a bud to open up ahead of time without destroying it. We ready to jump into this. We ready to jump into that. But jumping into things can destroy your work, and it can give you a bad name. Because if you're not ready for it, you don't know what you're going to be exposed to that you can't handle. So you know how they say, sometimes the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You putting yourself here, and God has really only has you here, and then you crush under the pressure, and you're right back down here. See, at least in God, even though Peter was about to sink, he was stayed with God, and God grabbed him right back up, brought him right back up to where he was supposed to be. He wasn't trying to do it on his own. But when we force things, that's us trying to do it on our own. And when you try to force it, you kill the seed. That's these premature babies. Sometimes they don't survive, especially if they're born too early, because they have to be built up to a certain stamina before they can carry the weight. So it requires faith of you trusting the process. Faith of you trusting the process. Peter's faith when he was walking on Peter's faith when he was walking on water. Look, I was like, so was Peter's phase a budding phase? Yes, it was. Peter's phase was a budding phase. Peter showed a massive sudden breakthrough of faith by being the only disciple to step out of the boat. He was the only one to step out the boat, and it showed massive faith. But it was an initial burst of supernatural potential breaking forth through his ordinary human limitations. So you start seeing the life. You start seeing the life. You're going to start doing some things that you wouldn't normally do. That doesn't mean the flower is there. That just means you're budding. That means God is in it. We can see God moving. We can see God working. Doesn't mean you're ready. But the buds are fragile and easily damaged by harsh weather. So the moment Peter faced the wind and the waves, his faith wavered and he sank. He lacked the seasoned, unshakable maturity of a full blossom. In a full blossom, if he was ready, he would not have sank. Peter would cave under pressure. That's the same thing when he said, "You're going to deny me thrice." He was still budding. Peter was one who would cave under pressure. And some of us do the same thing. So God has us in these budding phases where when you see you reach your maturity stage, the things I do now, I couldn't do that before. I have a greater stamina now to handle certain things because God has matured me, because God has processed me. I went through the sprouting, I went through the budding. So he had the desire, as we do, but he didn't yet have the stamina. It's almost like how a baby learns to walk, right? When a baby learns to walk, what? He has the desire to walk, but he doesn't have the stamina. So what did he do? What does he do? He keeps falling. And like I said, it's first starting, it's going to be trial and error until you gain that stamina. And when God keeps producing you, and God keeps producing some things in you, then you'll gain the stamina. Your capacity will be stretched for more. You can handle more. Next time, that wave is not going to knock you down. In the budding process, the flower is not yet fully formed. Peter had the right spiritual instincts. He recognized Jesus and wanted to be where Jesus was, but his execution was incomplete. It was incomplete. And a lot of times in buddings, you will have those incomplete things. You will have those things. I wanted to do more. I wish I could have. I tried to start in the building. I tried to get a building, but it just didn't happen for me. So in that instance, I could have sank, but Jesus caught me. God caught me, and I'm still walking. I'm still in transition. It's still thriving. It did not destroy me. I might have made a mistake, but it's part of the process. Failure helps you to learn more. Nothing great ever happens, and I truly, but honestly believe this. Nothing great ever happens without failure. There's going to be failure in there somewhere because it teaches you. It teaches you. So, but when Jesus caught him, he said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt?" But see, that little correction is how a gardener treats the budding plant. He shields it and protects it from the elements that are meant to destroy it, that could destroy it. And so Jesus has to protect us and keep us safe while he's maturing us. He can't allow us to go through everything. He can't allow us to have everything we want. Even in spiritual warfare, the enemy is still sending them storms. But God is only going to allow you to go through what he knows you're able to handle. So Peter was able to handle walking on that water. It wasn't just till it got real bad. Now, I'm not going to say till it got real bad because it was bad. It was bad. But then he saw this really ferocious wave and it startled him. He lost his focus. So he could handle it until he couldn't handle it. And that's how it is. You can handle it till you can't handle it. But God is always there when enough is enough. So just keep walking, just keep stepping. Look, in the Gospels, Peter was constantly budding, full of zeal, making bold declarations, but quickly falling away or denying Christ under pressure. He couldn't handle pressure. And so that's what God had to do. God had to mature him. We're going to pick up right here next week. Look, we're going to pick up right here next week. We're going to pick up right here next week because I told y'all this budding stage is where a lot of people fall. They sink with no return, or they get stuck. You know, because God wants to do so much more, but the budding phase is where you have to be focused. And when you lose your focus and you lose You lose your focus and you begin to sink. Sometimes when Jesus catch you, look, you might be scared to sink again and you don't want to do it no more. So this budding phase is so very important because this is where a lot of people get stuck. But it's the process of life. It's the cycle of life. And we all have to go through it. And it's going to cause us to go through some hard times. It's going to cause us to be in some stressful situations because it produces life. That's where you start seeing it. So we're going to pick up here next week, talking more about the cycle of life. But I hope that I bless somebody. Stay encouraged, be blessed. And I love you. Have a good weekend.